Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Food Farm Talk. I'm one of your hosts, Emily Duncan, usually here with Abdul Rahim Abdullahi. And this week we are super excited to introduce a new running series to the show. Our new series that's going to be airing once a month on our regular Thursday morning show here on CFRU 93.3 in Guelph. It's called Talk Dirty to Me. And I know what you may be thinking, but we are actually going to be talking about soil. And so here to introduce the series with me, I have Cameron Ogilvie, who's working with the new Soils at Guelph initiative. Thanks for being here, Cameron.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'm so excited about this new series, and we're really interested to learn more about soils. Tell us how you got involved with this project and what it's about.
Yep, of course. Soils at Guelph is a new initiative of the university. There was a donation made back in the fall by Lillian Morris, Glacier Farm Media, Bob and Moira Kerr, along with the Ontario Agricultural College, to prioritize outreach about the state of soil in Ontario and also why we should be concerned about managing our soils more sustainably. So that's kind of where Soils at Guelph started from, and then I got hired on later on in the summer, and so I am the outreach and communications coordinator for that.
That sounds awesome. It sounds like this is an important initiative. And so as the outreach coordinator, why is it important to you that people in the Guelph community learn more about the state of our soils?
Soil, as I've talked with people, I think soil is perhaps one of our most neglected natural resources. And arguably, I think we could say that soil is the foundation of not only the agri-food industry, but pretty well all life on land, we could say. Soil is the foundation of food, and this goes back for thousands of years. You can think of indigenous communities and ancient spiritualities talking about the earth as our mother, the one that gave birth to humanity. We're formed from the soil, or some of what these narratives would talk about. But interestingly enough, in the past 10 years, less than 10 years, there's been more people living in cities than there are people living in rural communities. So what this means is there are more people who are interacting with high rises and highways than there are people interacting with soil. And so the importance of soil for sustainable food systems can sometimes get neglected, and maybe we get caught up in some more popular natural resources that are maybe a bit more trendy in the news.
Well, I hope that through this series, we'll be able to make soil become a bit more trendy. And so the Soils at Guelph initiative has a couple events coming up that people might be interested in hearing about. It's kind of launching this fall. What's on the horizon?
Definitely. I guess the first thing is that myself and several other professors, including the guests that we'll be having on the show in just a moment, we will all be at Canada's Outdoor Farm Show next week. That's September 10th to 12th. And so we're just going to be there to engage with whoever's at the show, whether that's growers or folks in the agri-food industry. We're going to be talking about the latest research on soil and also hearing about what the implications might be for end users of this latest research. The Thursday of that week, so Thursday, September 12th, we're hosting a public lecture here in Guelph. It's going to be at Agri-Food Labs, and it's all on regenerative agriculture. So we have a soil scientist from General Mills. That's the General Mills who makes your Cheerios. Stephen Rosenzweig is going to be coming and joining us to talk about why General Mills is investing in soil health and particularly in regenerative agriculture. There's going to be a great panel discussion that will come with that event as we talk about different creative ways that we can incentivize sustainable soil management. So that's Thursday, September 12th. That's going to be starting at 2 p.m. And then we also have an event following that. So one week following that, on Thursday, September 19th, we're having a launch open house for the Soils at Guelph initiative. And so that'll run from 2 till 3:30 p.m. in the Summerlee Science Complex atrium here at the university. And then we're going to have a tour of the Soil Health Interpretive Center at Elora. And there's tons of opportunities. And if you haven't been following any of that, you can follow us on Twitter. We're @soils@Guelph. Follow us there and you'll be able to find all these updates.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of exciting things coming up and ways that people can learn more about soil and learn more about this exciting research that's happening.
Absolutely.
And more information on Twitter @soils@Guelph. Okay, well, I think now it's time to kind of get this series launched. And so I'm going to turn over to Cameron to start the Talk Dirty to Me series. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Adam Gillespie, and you're listening to Talk Dirty to Me.
Thanks for being here. My name is Cameron Ogilvie. I'm the host of this series called Talk Dirty to Me here on Food Farm Talk. And this series is all about soil. Soil is the foundation of life. And maybe if you think that's a stretch, as we've already been talking about, consider the value that ancient societies have placed on soil. We're going to focus a little bit more on that and why we should be concerned about it. Today, in Ontario, in the 21st century, why should we be caring about soil? And so I am pleased to have Adam Gillespie with me today. Adam is a professor of soil chemistry in the School of Environmental Sciences here at the University of Guelph, and he specializes in some very interesting topics like soil health testing. Did you know that soil can have health? We're going to get into that a little bit. Soil organic matter, and he's done a lot of soil mapping in Ontario over the past number of years. So why don't we jump straight into that? Adam, what is soil? Can you help me with that a little bit? What's soil?
Yeah, why would you start with a big question like that one? Well, just before I do that, I want to thank you for letting me be the first person on your new series. I think it's great. I mean, the more we can talk about what underpins agriculture, the better. And I think a lot of people are really getting interested in what soil is and what it does. And so with that, what is soil? I mean, everybody has probably a different way they could describe it. I mean, when I talk about soil, I tell people, well, when you have some soil in the palm of your hand, what do you see? Usually what I see is stuff that came from rocks and stuff that came from plants. And so we can think of, soils when they were first, I guess rocks when they were first left behind by glaciers, at least around here in Guelph. There were some weathering processes, and that just means erosion and breaking things down. You start to make that mineral component. But then there's also the dead plants and dead bugs, but it's mostly dead plants. And that makes the organic matter part of soils. And that's kind of what really interests me. It really holds my interest for the research side of it, but it's what I think a lot about when we're talking about soil health and sustainable agriculture.
This organic matter component.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is a great transition. What's organic matter for those of us maybe who are not well versed in soil? What's organic matter?
All right. Well, everyone's talking about carbon, and talking about carbon dioxide in the air, and we're talking about carbon cycling. And organic matter really is, I guess, the right use of the word organic. And
right, not necessarily the non-GMO, non-pesticide organic.
That's right.
Right, okay.
Just meaning if we're thinking like a chemist, it's the part of soils that have got carbon in it.
Okay.
And so organic matter is, let's just take a big ballpark, almost 2/3 carbon, but there's nitrogen, there's some sulfur, there's other elements that are in that organic matter. But it's really the stuff that is in soil that was once living but is now not.
Decomposed from those plants and from those organisms.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. You gave me an example one time to explain the idea that not all organic matter is the same. You talked about a craft dinner box.
I did, yeah. The box of craft dinner test. here's what you do. Okay, you get a box of Kraft Dinner and you look at the nutrition label. And on the nutrition label, there's going to be a number that tells you how many carbohydrates and how much fat, how much protein is in there. But actually, carbohydrates and fat and protein, they all contain carbon, but they're different kinds of carbon. And we recognize that they're different kinds of carbon because we go through the trouble of actually listing it on a nutrition label. So organic matter in soils also has carbohydrates and fats and proteins and a whole bunch of other things in it. And, when you're eating your Kraft Dinner, you're thinking about your own human nutrition, right? And maybe you're trying to track your carbs. That's your business.
Yeah.
But in soils, you're going to find that those different kinds of carbon are also going to have different pathways. They came from different places. They were probably made by different microorganisms, and then they may also have different fates. So some of those things are going to bind to the solid parts. Some of those things are going to be degraded. So there's an interplay between the kind of organic matter that's there and sort of the microbes that are eating it.
And so, as you've already alluded to, like the fate of that organic matter is important, and it's tied to so many other things that organic matter ends up being this very important part of the soil that affects plant growth. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Why does organic matter affect plant growth?
Organic matter, so you think about what does a plant need to live, right? Plant needs to have a home, so where they can put their roots. Isn't that fun?
That's cute.
But I think what plants are really looking for is water and nutrients. And we depend on soils to be a reservoir for water and also kind of a reservoir for those nutrients. And so in addition to that solid place for the roots to anchor the plant, soil organic matter contains nutrients. So I mentioned a moment ago that there's probably, I would say 10% of organic matter is actually nitrogen, which is the big plant nutrient. There's also going to be some phosphorus, some sulfur bound up in that. And what happens is, if you don't think about fertilizers for a second, just think about somewhere where there's no fertilizers being added. It's actually the microbes that are going to turn that organic matter around and release some of those nutrients, and so the plants can pick that up. We use fertilizer to bolster that and to make sure we've got a good, healthy crop.
Right.
But plants do organic matter is going to have those nutrients in it. Second thing is the water. Organic matter is kind of light. It's kind of fluffy. It also has a lot of active sites on it, which means that it's really good at sorbing and bringing in water. We think of soils with higher organic matter as being really good for holding water when it's dry, but also for letting water infiltrate when you get a big downpour. So sort of good on both ends of that wetness spectrum. I got a third one to throw in there.
Please do.
The home. They make a good home. The reason they make a good home is because organic matter, being fluffy, it's going to help mitigate compaction. And we think a lot about soil structure. Actually, when you're digging a soil pit and you're a bit of a soil nerd, as some of us are.
As you are, yes.
Yeah, well, you start to looking at the structure. Is it granular and sort of like, that's actually the right word for it, granular, or is it kind of blocky? And you're really looking for stuff that's granular, so it really lets that water get in there, so that you get good root access, you get good root anchoring capacity. Nice.
So structure, water holding capacity, nutrients, man, tons of good stuff associated with organic matter. And this is why you would say that organic matter is a great indicator of soil health, if we want to call say that a soil can be healthy or unhealthy. Is that correct?
I think that's where a lot of people seem to go when they're talking about soil health. There's a few things that you can sort of throw into that mix. But if you wanted to talk about just one thing, I think organic matter seems to be what a lot of folks are going after.
Okay. Now, are there other ways to measure soil health? Because actually, maybe why don't we step back from that question first and ask, why might people not be interested in using organic matter as a good indicator of soil health? Like, are there challenges with managing or are there challenges with measuring organic matter over time that would make this a not very useful measurement of soil health?
Okay, so, and allow me to take a step back as well. What I like about the word, or I guess the term soil health, is that it's just vague enough. You're not supposed to say that as a scientist. You're supposed to be really like, what is soil health? What's
Very
this,
precise,
right?
Yeah.
But, wow, you can use the term about yourself. Are you healthy or are you not healthy? Well, I don't know. Do I have a sore leg? Is my toe, did I stub my toe? Is cholesterol's too high? I got to get some glasses. Kind of not getting enough sleep. All this good stuff. When you go to the doctor's office, you get all this battery of tests done on you. And then at the end of the day, they say, you
are healthy or unhealthy?
Well, they don't say you're healthy. You're never healthy.
Right.
Something's wrong. But so then you focus on that one thing that's wrong.
Right.
And I think the reason why I like soil health is that if you're working on a farm or you have a certain patch of land, might be that organic matter is too low, but it might not be. You might have a compaction problem, or you might have a drainage problem, or you may have perhaps a soil texture that just always gives you grief. And so you have to come up with some kind of way to work around that or work with what you have. And so the reason I like soil health is that the vagueness lets you see your operation or your particular problems within that overall idea.
Right. And it's a broad enough one that it can fit into anybody's operation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a side note is that there's the question I sometimes get is, well, if a soil is poorly drained, maybe it should be poorly drained, and you should just leave it like that rather than put in drainage. And I think that's more of a choice for the particular operation. And I bring it up because that's more of a philosophical approach about how people want to manage a particular patch of land, whether that's going to work or not work. I think
then we get into kind of healthy lifestyles, I guess is what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that there's something to be said for what, say, a wetland would provide in terms of an overall ecosystem service, and I think you have to consider that. I think that's a discussion that's ongoing, and so, but it's a good discussion to have.
Yeah.
If we're talking about sort of farming practices and land management, the soil health thing really, really works. We can really think about that as being a good way to look at the weaknesses and look at the problems and identify them.
Okay, excellent.
So can I answer your question?
Yeah. Let's get to it.
So say you're not thinking about organic matter. What else are you thinking about?
Right.
Well, you could be thinking about compaction. Compaction, I think, is wow. I mean, there's some people who say that's our yield killer. I mean, that's a major problem. And I think in terms of how to deal with compaction, there's a lot of different things people are trying. Soil organic matter buildup is definitely one of those things that you can do to try and mitigate compaction before it happens. There's research on the go right now to see how we can use organic matter to make compaction better after it happens. I don't have an answer for you because that's, research.
Right.
That's the way it works. But I think it's really teaching us a lot about engineering and tractors and tire sizes and all the sort of more iron side of farming and what we can do about compaction. The third one's drainage, and I think a lot of people we don't really need to talk about drainage here, but a lot of people are working on drainage.
Right. Okay, so we got organic matter, we've got compaction. Maybe these two things are decent indicators or can be good indicators of the health of the soil. You talked about microbes being responsible for cycling organic matter and the nutrients that are held up in that organic matter. How have some people been trying to measure soil health when it comes to the microbe component of the soil?
Okay. So there are... there's soil tests that are now coming out. So I'll start you off with soil testing in general. I mean, people have been testing their soils for a long time. And I think that's great. We call them soil tests. Oh, it's like, again, you're going to get your blood test, right? But what are they really doing? Over the long term, people have always been testing things like their nutrient content, and they use that, or they should be using that, in their fertility plan. Often people are measuring organic matter, total organic matter, although I think that's probably not as common. But now, with this interest in soil health, there's soil health testing.
Right.
And they've started to come up with almost brand names, I guess. And I'll use one of them because it's not really a brand. It's Cornell University has a set of tests that they're doing. There's a guy named Haney I think he's from Texas, who has a set of tests that he's doing. And what these are they're trying to measure more things in your soil. They're trying to access the organic matter, but also what the organic matter is doing, okay? And what's the organic matter doing? Well, presumably it's being cycled by the microbes. So one of the tests that they do is something called the flash respiration test. And what flash just means is fast. So they try and measure how the soil respiration is going over a short period of time. And I think I've seen them from 1 to 7 days. That's kind of what they try to keep it down to. Because, microbes respire, and that means, what are they going to be respiring? Well, they respire the stuff they eat, which is the organic matter. And so you're trying to get a feel for how fast that is happening, so use that test. There's other people, they will extract the soil with water and measure how much carbon is dissolved in that water, and we hope, anyway, that matches what maybe is a fast cycling carbon. And then there's other people that are starting to use organic chemistry. So they'll have different, for those of you in the listening audience who are organic chemists, you can do all kinds of reactions, and there's something that they use called permanganate. And permanganate likes to take carbon and turn it into carbon dioxide. Permanganate has oxygen in it. Everybody knows peroxide, right? It makes your hair white.
Right.
Because it adds oxygen. Well, this is the same idea. But the reason we like it is because it's purple. And so it starts out super purple, and as you mix it with your soil, it becomes less purple, and we can use that as a measure for how much carbon it oxidized. The depurpling.
The depurpling effect.
And so you think about, there's all these different, and there's many, many more, but that's sort of what they're trying to do. They're trying to mimic the microbes with these different tests, do it in less than a week, so you can actually get around to the business of farming.
Okay, so we got a bunch of things there. We got measuring organic matter. We got measuring respiration, compaction, which is also, as you said, is associated with organic matter buildup in the soil. So it's all kind of coming back to organic matter as being a really good indicator of health. What have we been seeing in Ontario in our soils when it comes to organic matter, say over the past 50 years? Are there any trends that come out?
Yeah. So by and large, like if I have actually looked at some data that comes out of labs, and the overall trend is that we're losing organic matter. And I'll start with the federal government. They actually offer a product. I believe it's a sustainability indicator, and they release these every few years, and it's actually across Canada. And one of them is organic matter. And what's kind of interesting is if you look out west, they're really gaining organic matter, and we're losing organic matter here in Eastern Canada. And it's a management story, top to bottom. And the reason is in the west, they've stopped using something called summer fallow, and they've also had better success with some of the minimum tillage. Whereas in Eastern Canada, we've kind of gone the opposite. Corn's doing well, beans are doing well, so we're tearing up a lot of pastures and planting annual crops. So we got different management approaches with different results and sort of how that organic matter is going. Now, if you look at Ontario at real data that's coming in, you can see that this trend is really starting to go down, but it's regional. And areas that are hotter, so down in the southwest, they're losing carbon quite rapidly. If you compare that to eastern Ontario, where things are a bit cooler, they're not losing carbon as much or as quickly, or however you want to say it. So there is a regional thing going on there.
Okay. And as you mentioned, out in Western Canada, they've moved away from summer fallow, and they've had some more success with no tillage or reduced tillage. And so I guess the two things being seen there is they are doing a better job at protecting their soil from wind and surface erosion, and they're also disturbing it less. And so you mentioned corn and beans in Ontario, and that we're tearing up pasture land. So why are corn and soybeans, why are they associated with more disturbance and less soil coverage?
Right. Okay, so are we going to get into the no-till talk right now? Is that what's happening?
Well, maybe we don't.
Okay, we're not doing tillage yet.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah.
Good, because that's. I fear all this stuff, but okay. Yeah, I mean, row cropping. I mean, let's face it. We have a really good system to feed ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm really on board with that. Now, the reason we talk about corn and beans being pretty tough on soil organic matter, and tillage being tough on soil organic matter, is you have a lot of these operations. So out west, summer fallow meant that you had 1 year without any crop on it. So it's a difference between inputs and outputs, okay? Mm-hmm. And in southern Ontario, there's no different. It's the difference between inputs and outputs. And so what that means, if you think about organic matter as a bathtub, or let's use the bank account. All right?
You make some deposits, make some withdrawals.
It's all about the inputs and the outputs.
Right.
And so the inputs are your crop residues, the outputs are decomposition. But the outputs are also erosion. Remember that. And so when you are planting, well, I'll use corn and beans as two good examples because they're a bit opposite. Actually, corn is a big plant. It makes a lot of biomass, and actually you can keep organic matter not bad with corn.
Right.
With beans, it's really hard to maintain your levels because the biomass is so small.
Right.
Your inputs go way down. But the other thing is when you have operations, you're going to be disturbing the soil, and that causes some erosion, but you're also aerating that soil. And so that's that decomposition kick up. And so that's one of the big reasons.
You're saying the aeration speeds up.
Yeah. Well, respiration, right?
Right.
Needs oxygen.
Right.
And so if you don't have oxygen, other processes happen, of course, but it's not as fast.
Yeah. And just so that we can be clear, you and I are both on the same page about this, but the fact that...
I hope so.
Yeah, we're going to test that out in a sec. The fact that corn and soybeans make up so much of our acreage, it's not necessarily because farmers they love to grow corn and soybeans. The markets that we have say that if you want to have a viable farm operation, these are the crops to grow on that kind of scale. And so it's not necessarily that farmers are consciously choosing to make farm decisions that are causing more disturbance and things like that. It's that there's a market which is creating this climate or this environment for loss of organic matter over time.
Yeah, and it seems that's part of the reason why it's persistent, of course, is that there's an infrastructure behind it.
Yeah.
And and I think farmers are going to run an operation the way they're going to run it.
Right. Now, maybe since we're kind of at an uncomfortable spot here.
I'm comfortable.
Are you comfortable?
Go ahead.
What's some good news stories that come out of this? How are you seeing some farmers respond to this loss of organic matter over time?
Right. So we have a bad news story, and the bad news story is that we feel that we're caught in this cycle, right? Of a market and a farming system and an organic matter soil health vortex or whatever you want to call it, that's not sustainable. So the good news that I find is, and we didn't do this in the introduction, allow me to introduce myself. Before I was a professor, I was working with OMAFRA for 3 years, and I did a lot of talking to farmers and a lot of these sort of events, similar to the Outdoor Farm Show. And what I found was there's a real appetite that go for soil health, an appetite for sustainable agriculture, which is, I think it's going mainstream. And it's not because people are touchy-feely or whatever you want to call it. I think that a lot of business decisions are now being made with the understanding that soil health is a yield builder and a sustainability builder, right? And so when I look at the interest and the questions that are coming out of the grower community, it's not all just yield contracts. A lot of it has to do with the land management for that longer term. And to me, I found that really heartening to talk to a lot of people, and even people who were really mad at me. They didn't believe it, but at least they were talking about it. You know, they weren't dismissing it outright anymore.
Right.
So to me, this is a good thing.
Right, and it's taken off.
Yeah.
And that is maybe a great spot to leave it, because the next time that you hear from us, I'm going to be having a wonderful guest on, Mel Limas. Mel is a rural sociologist, and she's going to be sharing with us a little bit about what that social change and maybe this social movement, this soil health movement is looking like right now. So thanks for listening. This is
Talk Dirty to Me.